Are diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives dead? According to gazillionaire Elon Musk, they should be. So if you missed it, Musk took to his own platform, X/Twitter, saying that anyone who uses the term DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion should be ashamed, saying that it's just another way of racism, particularly in organizations. And at the same time, many of the tech giants who once really invested in DEI circa 2020 have kind of taken a step back in terms of their initiatives, slamming brakes on what we thought was socially impactful changes, particularly in organizational environments. So what exactly is literally happening? I want to talk about it. Hi, my name is Mamobo Ogoro, founder of Gorm and social psychologist. And if you want to learn how to unify across differences, make sure you're subscribing to our channel. Back in 2020, the excitement for DEI was on it like a hot bonnet. Even in Ireland, we were, for the first time, I felt, we're having deep conversations, productive thoughts, and really moving forward as it relates to diversity, equity, inclusion. I think it was from the back of the Black Lives Matter movement and from the back of heightened consciousness surrounding social issues in Ireland and abroad. However, fast forward to 2024, we're facing a substantial backlash as it relates to divisions, as it relates to diversity and inclusion being pulled back, and as it relates to organizations kind of taking a step back when it relates to social justice, when it relates to inclusion and equity within communities. Corporate budgets are being slashed, consultancies are actually closing up, and DEI initiatives are encountering challenges from various angles. So why is all of this happening? Well, some are blaming social justice activists for demanding more when it comes to organizational cultures, corporate outputs, etc. And others are pointing the fingers to straight white middle-aged men for discriminating against them. Side note, Gorm is not a platform that we discriminate or bash straight white middle-aged men. We recognize power and privilege where it is at. And my own personal experience is that a ton of the doors that have been opened for me have been by straight white privileged male men who believe that Ireland is a place where everybody belongs and Ireland is a place that we need to unify. So with all that's happening, what if I told you that there's more to this conversation and there's more that needs to be understood when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion? And a handful of DEI experts, organizational psychologists, and social psychologists like myself are pondering what might be going wrong, and more importantly, how can we fix it? So let's dive into the matter. The problem? Solely having a narrow, surface-level approach to diversity as the sole metric of success is not the answer. It turns out that it's not as straightforward as solely boosting the numbers of people of different backgrounds in your organization, having cultural events, and inviting specific DEI speakers to your event. The fact is that all of that are great things that are going on as it relates to diversity and inclusion, but that's just scratching the surface. I like to see it like an iceberg, where at the top of the surface we have the things that matter, that make us feel good, that make us have a really great experience on a heart level when it comes to diversity and inclusion. These are the events, these are the speaking engagements, these are the once-off workshops, X, Y, and Z. But beneath the surface as it relates to diversity and inclusion, it's important to have strategy, it's important to have leadership, it's important to have policies that really create a holistic experience when it comes to putting these initiatives forward and creating a more equitable environment, not only within the workplace, but within our society at large. For example, I get asked a lot, Mamobo, how do I recruit more Black people into the workplace? How do I recruit more people of color? X, Y, and Z. But I actually ask the question, what are you doing internally to create processes and practices that are actually creating the space more equitable, that is making it more open for different communities to move across the workplace ladder and actually creating a kind of cool environment to work in? So the truth is that we need to broaden our metrics. We need to shift towards not just having diversity, but inclusion, and explore ways that we can be informed by data and evidence to quantify the impact of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It needs to be a more holistic approach, not just the top of the iceberg. And luckily, there are brilliant minds and brilliant forward thinkers that are actually measuring and moving this initiatives forward to create a space where we can actually be holistic in our approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion. For example, there are books such as The Data-Driven DEI and DEI Deconstructed that give us insightful perspectives as it relates to moving diversity and inclusion forward. For example, in DEI Deconstructed by Lily Zhang, they say that there are no get equitable quick strategies in the DEI space that work. And those that exist, for example, one-off workshop models, truncated short-ended workshops, and standalone DEI talks, should be reimagined and redeployed as part of a larger, more comprehensive change-making efforts. Those planning and budgeting for the DEI should conceptualize it in not as a serial disjointed set of one-shots, but as an interconnected and cumulative set of interventions building towards change. Get this book. It's really good. And as we move towards real change, it's important for us to have evidence-backed and research-informed ways that we could actually move towards sustainable approaches to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Research shows that the level of inclusion directly influences diversity as an overall outcome for the organization. I always say that diversity, equity, inclusion shouldn't be that as an acronym. It should be really flipped over as IED rather than DEI, because we should actually come first with this idea of inclusion first with the outcome of diversity. And in one US study, the researchers found that, I quote, diversity management alone was not sufficient for improving workplace performance. What is required instead is an approach that promotes greater inclusion of employees in a way that takes their views into account and promotes self-esteem. So it's time to stop thinking that diversity is the goal, but rather inclusive practices that create an environment of belonging. I like to think of it like a birthday party. We've all been to a birthday party that we've been included in. We've been there, but we didn't really like the space. We didn't like the music, we didn't like the food, we didn't want to be there. We were just included. And there wasn't really any inclusive practices. They didn't really ask us if we wanted to be there. We were just there. And a lot of people from diverse backgrounds know the feeling of going into a space as the diversity token and just being there. But in order to actually create a space where everyone belongs, holistic approaches to inclusion, in the party analogy, asking people what music do they like, where they want to sit, how we can make a space more inclusive for them, that actually creates that environment where people can actually feel like they can thrive, they can belong, and they can actually actively contribute to that environment. And there's more. The business case for diversity arguments, seeing that does a diverse environment create a better workforce performance, etc. People always say yes, but there's more to it than you actually think. That's more correlation than causation. Let's think of it this way. If somebody has white teeth, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're gonna have lung cancer. That's a correlation, not causation. What needs to happen is that we need to understand what works for our specific organization and specific environments that breed inclusivity, that understand the culture diversity that goes on within their organization, and that actually can breed a space where everyone feels like they can somewhat belong. We can't just assume that just because something is the average, that it works for us. It's actually not. We need to understand our environments. And what could that look like? Well, there are different approaches, bottom-up approaches and top-down approaches. And these are some things that we kind of go deeper in our consultancy work in Gorm. But the general understanding is that diversity, for the sake of diversity, does not automatically lead to a better workplace environment. The evidence actually is quite sparse and it's not really straightforward. And in some cases, it can actually hurt the performance if that cultural diversity or how it's managed is not in a way that is productive. What we need is that we need nuanced understandings, moving beyond ideas of purely having diversity inherently as good, but focusing on the way that we can actually build inclusive frameworks and environments within our understanding and organizations. So what's the call to action here? We need to listen, adapt, and deliver solutions that align to the needs of organization. And that's where Gorm comes in. We are not just delivering DEI talks, workshops, we actually want to make real change within organizations so we can unify across our differences. And that includes intercultural training and consultancy that delivers real cultural management change as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Not only for governments, but for corporates, for businesses, and for those who want to strive towards actually generating impact within their organization. We want to deliver targeted solutions, thoughts, and expert knowledge that can really inform ways that you can actually build an organization where people can unify, people can be more collaborative, and people can actually create a space of belonging. So definitely, if you want to talk to us, stay in touch with us, stay tuned on our channel where we actually explore this on a deeper level.